Gender discrimination. My husband deliberately drugged me to cause a miscarriage. After being reborn, I vowed to make him unable to have children. On the eve of the family reunion for the new year, I jumped to my death. In my previous life, I devoted myself to caring for my husband and serving Margaret, who was always finding fault with me, embodying the perfect model of a housewife. But after my husband became successful, he secretly drugged me to abort the female fetus in my womb. He took a mistress who could bear him a son, and to fulfill their pre-marriage agreement, Margaret even pretended to be sick to steal all my savings. In the end, I jumped off the rooftop in a daze. In my second life, I found myself back among this trashy in-law family. 2 lines. You're a pregnant wife. Wonderful. I'm finally going to be a father. When I opened my eyes again, the sound of Carl Miller's excited shouts echoed in my ears like thunder. Looking at Carl Miller's middle-aged, obese face and his sparse, shiny scalp, I was momentarily dazed. He excitedly dropped the pregnancy test stick and grabbed my hand. Honey, are you okay? Do you feel any discomfort? Margaret came out upon hearing the commotion, smiling so broadly her wrinkles gathered together, and placed a cup of warm water in front of me. Drink some water, dear. I bet this strong and healthy air is just being mischievous and causing you trouble. I was already 34 years old, married for 10 years, and had been trying to conceive for 9 years. After countless failed IVF attempts, we finally conceived naturally this year. Carl Miller also got promoted at work, became a manager, and made a fortune from stock trading. It was a smooth year for our marriage. In my previous life, I was immersed in joy, but I didn't know that the surprise and concern on his face had other emotions. My best friend is a doctor at a private hospital. During the early pregnancy screening, Carl Miller and Margaret accompanied me, and I secretly asked her about it. But ever since she found out I was having a daughter, Margaret's attitude toward me grew increasingly cold. Later, an accidental fall resulted in the loss of the baby. Before I had even settled into my postpartum recovery period, Margaret went to the hospital for a checkup due to feeling unwell. The results revealed that she had late-stage cancer. I had saved up 100,000 yuan with great effort, intending to use it as an education fund for my daughter. At that time, I had no choice but to give it all to Margaret for her so-called medical expenses. But to my shock, Margaret had been faking her illness all along. She was doing it to save money for her mistress, who was pregnant with a boy, to pay the dowry for their marriage contract. Watching the mistress walk into her home with my husband, her arms around him, her pregnant belly showing, looking so happy and shy. I confronted Carl Miller, but he and Margaret attacked me together, leaving me barely alive. In the end, I jumped off the rooftop in despair on New Year's Eve, covered in injuries. They immediately welcomed the mistress into their home, and the next year they had a grandson, becoming a happy family. At that moment, I stared at my husband, who was excitedly about to pick me up in a princess carry. I smiled and took a step back. Be careful, the pregnancy isn't stable yet, don't be reckless. Carl Miller nodded repeatedly. Wife, this child was hard won. You mustn't overexert yourself. If necessary, quit your job and stay home to rest. By the way, from now on, Mom and I will take good care of you. I'll make sure to accompany you to all your prenatal checkups. I smiled faintly, but my fingertips had already clenched my palm until it bled. No need. Don't you have work to do? You need to focus on earning money for the baby now. He agreed, kissed my forehead deeply, and waved goodbye with a smile. Once Carl Miller had left the house, I felt a wave of nausea and vomited into the nearby trash can. After I died, I learned that he had secretly drugged me, which is why my body was weak and I miscarried. Everything that had been kept from me earlier flashed before my eyes like a rapid sequence. That woman was Allison Carter, his high school sweetheart. After hearing that Carl Miller had made it big, she found him, and the two of them cheated on their spouses, reigniting their old flame. She even divorced her husband for him, actively trying to get pregnant, waiting for Carl Miller to kick me out so she could take my place. I went to the hospital for a prenatal checkup alone. According to the timeline, I was only just under 2 months pregnant. There were still a few weeks left before the 12-week NT scan, and there was still a chance to turn things around. Fate had a way of bringing enemies together. While undergoing a checkup at the obstetrics and gynecology department, I unexpectedly ran into Allison Carter. It was winter, and I was cold, so I was wrapped in a thick scarf and wearing a mask inside the room. She didn't recognize me. But I saw her clearly. Her features weren't particularly striking, but her wavy curls, open coat, and A-line dress accentuated her curves. The cheap perfume she wore made my nose wrinkle. Once, she had come to my door with a big belly, looking as if she were carrying a gold ingot, and her arrogant expression was still fresh in my mind. Hatred surged within me, and I clenched my fists tightly. I sat down next to her. Seeing her staring at the pregnancy test photo on her phone, I asked politely, "Beautiful lady, are you here to get a blood test too?" Allison Carter didn't seem to notice. "Yes, when was your last period?" "Last month on the 15th. "What about you?" Her eyes lit up. "We're quite a match then. I'm only a day off you. I was on the 16th. My clasped hands tightened slightly, and my heart grew even colder. So, Carl Miller had already cheated on me before I got pregnant, just to get two women pregnant at the same time, to see who could give birth to a son and continue their family lineage. At that moment, I noticed a faint pink rose beneath her collar, as if it had been tattooed recently. I couldn't help but ask, why get a tattoo after getting pregnant? Allison Carter blushed and lowered her head. "Oh, that? My husband and I were high school sweethearts. He wanted me to get a pink rose tattooed on my chest to symbolize our first love. We got pregnant soon after, so it's a bit embarrassing." I gave her a meaningful, cold glance. She had only recently divorced, and now that she saw my husband was successful, she abandoned her failed business and her ex-husband to indulge in a high school romance. "Your relationship is truly enviable." Hearing my praise, her smile grew even brighter. During the long wait, Allison Carter and I chatted casually. She had never seen me before in this life and was completely unfamiliar with me. When we left the hospital, we were already holding hands like sisters. "Sister, where do you live? I'll give you a ride when my husband comes." "I live in Pine Grove." I deliberately mentioned a neighborhood closer to her and politely declined her offer. "No need. I took the day off work, and I have to go back soon. I live in Oak Ridge community. We're pretty close. Why don't we exchange contact information? We can go for prenatal checkups together in the future," she said enthusiastically. "Sure." Watching Allison Carter rub her belly and leave with a delighted expression, I couldn't help but smile coldly. Those two owe me, and I'll make them pay back every last bit. When I got home, I saw Margaret using that old wooden cutting board that had been around for over a decade to cook. Wooden cutting boards that have been used for a long time contain mold toxins, which are known carcinogens. Plus, she never cleans hers, so it's basically a breeding ground for bacteria. In my previous life, I had replaced all the old cutting boards for Margaret's health, but instead of gratitude, I was scolded for being wasteful. This time, I won't replace it. Let them enjoy every nutrient-laden meal together. I clutched my chest and pretended to vomit, burying my face in Carl Miller's chest. "I can't eat. Honey, I went to a postpartum recovery restaurant today and used your card to order a pregnancy nutrition meal. They'll deliver it to us, so we don't have to worry about our nutrition." Carl Miller hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, I'll listen to you. It's for you and the baby." I concealed the calculation in my eyes. After finding out I was pregnant, I immediately contacted my best friend who works as an ultrasound technician. She couldn't wait to congratulate me. Seeing no joy on my face, my best friend looked puzzled. "What's wrong?" "The baby is developing well, you don't need to worry too much." I shook my head. "Ying, Carl Miller has been unfaithful, and his mistress is also pregnant, just one day apart from me." I told her everything about Margaret and Carl Miller's affair. My best friend was shocked and immediately started cursing. "Damn it! Carl Miller is as ugly as a toad, and he's cheating on you. What era are we living in? He's still playing the gender discrimination card? Margaret is a woman herself. Does he think she's not good enough for him? Does their family have an imperial tomb that needs someone to guard it? Do they really need a son to be the tomb guardian? I looked at her with regret. Now that things have come to this, I must divorce him. As for our daughter, I must ensure she is born safely into this world. So, Ying, I need your help. When I went for my prenatal checkup again, it was already the 12-week early pregnancy screening. Carl Miller and Margaret insisted on accompanying me. This was the moment that would decide my daughter's fate. Even now, thinking back to that moment, I still feel a chill run down my spine, and my palms sweat slightly. I specifically made an appointment with my best friend for the early pregnancy screening. Margaret kept glancing at the ultrasound image and couldn't help but lower her voice and whisper to her. "Doctor, you've known me for years. I just want to know, is my daughter-in-law carrying a boy or a girl?" The doctor replied with a hint of resignation, "Auntie, the law prohibits non-medical gender determination of fetuses. Besides, boys and girls are both treasures nowadays. Why dwell on such a thing?" Margaret immediately chimed in with a serious expression. "Of course. Whether it's a boy or a girl, they're all our Ching family's grandchildren. I'll love them no matter what. After all, it wasn't easy for my daughter-in-law to conceive this child." My best friend nodded in satisfaction. "Auntie, you're thinking exactly right. However, the child's father will definitely have to work hard to earn money in the future, and Auntie will also have to put in effort to educate the child. After all, they're mischievous." Margaret's eyes grew brighter and brighter as she listened, her smile spreading widely, her voice trembling with excitement. "Oh, children are always mischievous, aren't they? As the grandmother, I'll definitely raise him well." Carl Miller, who had been staring at the screen, couldn't help but glance at my lower abdomen. He couldn't hide his joy. "Little treasure, we've been waiting for you for so long." My best friend and I exchanged a cold glance in a corner where no one could see, our eyes flashing with a sharp, icy glint. Sure enough, a few days later, my best friend quietly told me. "Lisa, you were right." Margaret wrapped herself up tightly again and brought her mistress alone for a checkup. It was arranged with my colleague. I did as you said and had my colleague tell Margaret that the child looks like a beauty in the making, so she should prepare some cute, pink outfits. When Margaret left, her face was as dark as a pot bottom. The mistress was completely in the dark and didn't notice a thing. Hearing this, I sighed in relief. And I knew that Allison Carter was actually carrying a boy. From then on, Margaret and her husband treated me even better, almost 1,000 times better than before the pregnancy. Carl Miller not only picked me up and dropped me off every day but also bought all sorts of things I liked and left them at home. The red envelopes kept coming. Margaret spent all day cleaning the house spotless, afraid I'd smell the cooking and get sick, so she'd prepare their dinner in advance and let the smell dissipate before serving me. She even went out of her way to give me money. "Xiaoyi, you are now the future pillar of the Qing family, you must not shortchange yourself." Looking into Carl Miller's earnest eyes, I suddenly overlapped with the memory from my previous life, where he and Margaret had beaten me to the ground together. All his pretenses of being a gentleman vanished once he felt triumphant, revealing his true nature. He was brutal, kicking me repeatedly in the abdomen that had just recovered from childbirth, and violently pulling my hair. That excruciating pain is something I will never forget. "You can't even give birth to a son, yet you have the nerve to accuse me of infidelity? Go accuse your own mother. After 10 years of marriage, you haven't even given me a single egg. Finally, someone can give me a son, and you won't step aside? You're incapable, yet you're blocking my path to a family with grandchildren? And now you've become as soft as silk, how ironic. No matter how much money he gives, I'll take it without hesitation. Sacrificing my dignity? That's impossible for me." At night, I pretended to be asleep but noticed the rustling sounds outside. I held my breath and quietly pressed my ear against the bathroom door to eavesdrop. Margaret was pleading earnestly. Son, Lisa is now carrying the heir, and the one outside is a burden. We must find a way to dispose of the child quickly. Don't let Lisa find out. If she gets emotional, it could affect my heir. Let's handle this quickly to avoid that woman causing trouble later." Carl Miller nodded solemnly, his tone tinged with cruelty. "Mom, don't worry. I'll handle everything." Little did they know they had already fallen into the trap I had set. The next day, I saw a message on my phone. It was from Allison Carter, inviting me to join her for a prenatal checkup. I knew Carl Miller didn't want Allison Carter to come to this hospital for her checkup, fearing that acquaintances might discover their relationship. But this hospital was the closest to where she lived, and she insisted it was more convenient. Carl Miller had no choice but to drive her to the hospital entrance each time, but he never went inside. That morning, before going to work, Carl Miller took out a thermos I hadn't seen before. I casually asked, "Honey, why aren't you using the thermos I bought for you?" His reaction was quick, he just furrowed his brow slightly. "Oh, the old one wasn't keeping the heat well anymore, so I bought a new one. Be careful on your way to work." I gave him a casual reminder without asking further, pretending to go back to bed for a nap. Through the door crack, I clearly saw him hurriedly putting something into the thermos. He then carefully disposed of anything that could incriminate him, throwing it into a trash bag and taking it with him. It seems the fish has taken the bait. Once I confirmed he had left, I went downstairs to keep my appointment for the prenatal checkup. "Sis, why do you always wear a mask and scarf whenever you see me?" Seeing me still wrapped up tightly, Allison Carter looked puzzled. "I have sensitive skin and am very sensitive to temperature changes. My skin turns red when it gets cold, and my husband doesn't want me to get cold, fearing it might affect the baby," I explained calmly. Allison Carter looked envious. "Wow, your husband cares so much about you. He must treat you very well, like you're made of glass." I just smiled and didn't say anything. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Carl Miller coming from a distance, so I quickly put on my sunglasses. "Your husband is here to pick you up. I won't disturb your alone time. Bye." Allison Carter waved at me and turned toward Carl Miller, looking just like a shy, love-struck young woman. After pretending to leave, I actually hid in a secluded spot to watch from afar. Sure enough, I saw Carl Miller take out that thermos. His smile was gentle, but to me, it was like a gentle knife, each stroke cutting into the soul. "Lalan, you must be thirsty after waiting so long. You have a cold stomach, drink some warm water to warm it up. Once you give birth to this child, I'll get rid of that woman who couldn't conceive for 10 years, and we can marry legitimately." When Carl Miller said this, his voice betrayed obvious nervousness. But Allison Carter, immersed in her bliss, didn't notice, and giggled. Even the pink roses on her chest trembled. Of course not. How could I compare to that housewife? I'm more beautiful than her, and I'm carrying your Ching family's only heir, maybe even a son. Immediately after, I watched her twist open the thermos and swallow the water laced with the concoction, sip by sip. The effects of the poison would take time to kick in, likely within 2 days. However, as far as I knew, Allison Carter had been experiencing some spotting in the past few days and was undergoing treatment to preserve the pregnancy. The dose Carl Miller had administered was a lethal dose. After urging Allison Carter to drink it, he grew even more panicked. Fortunately, as composed as he was, he didn't show any signs of panic on the surface. He spoke softly to comfort her. "It's okay, Lon. I'll take you home. The doctor told you to rest, didn't he? Your pregnancy isn't stable yet, so you shouldn't be out and about." Allison Carter blushed and tiptoed to give him a light kiss. "I understand. But I still hope that one day you'll take me back to our home." She wasn't the kind of woman with shallow motives, she was always thinking of ways to provoke him. Carl Miller paused for a moment before responding directly. "Of course, it's only a matter of time." Watching them pretend to be harmonious while harboring ulterior motives. I decided to stir the pot. Just as I closed the passenger door for Allison Carter, Carl Miller's phone rang. He hesitated for a few seconds before stepping aside to answer it, lowering his voice. "What's wrong, honey?" "My voice is hoarse, honey. I'm in pain, and there's some bleeding. I'm worried something's wrong with the baby. Please come back and take me to the hospital." Hearing this, he stiffened and agreed immediately. He pulled the unsuspecting Allison Carter out of the car. Even her rabbit fur hooded scarf was torn off and left on the ground, stained with dirt. She looked shocked and confused. "What's going on, Jianghe? You said you'd take me home." Carl Miller clearly seemed anxious. "There's an urgent matter at the office. I can't take you home now. Just call a ride-hailing service, okay?" I stood nearby, watching coldly. Look at that, that's the true nature of a man who can't keep his emotions in check. He doesn't favor the new lover or the old one, he only loves himself. Allison Carter was eventually shoved into a taxi and left, looking completely bewildered. 5 minutes later, Carl Miller hurriedly called me back. "Lisa, stay home and wait for me. I'll come pick you up right away. Don't worry, and don't move around too much." Before long, I found myself unexpectedly meeting him in the hospital lobby. He clearly hadn't expected me to arrive so quickly, and his expression was rather awkward. "Honey, what are you doing here?" "What else?" "I felt some abdominal pain just now, so I came straight over." "I'm fine now." "But why are you here? Didn't you go to work?" Carl Miller frowned, unconsciously clenching the hem of his shirt. "I came to the hospital to visit a sick colleague and was just about to pick you up." "That's perfect. Let's go for my prenatal checkup first. I'm a bit thirsty." I blinked and pretended to take the thermos from him, but he clenched his lips tightly and held it close to his chest. "No, you can't drink it." I feigned confusion. "Why not?" Carl Miller's ears turned red, a sign of guilt. "I have a cold, and I drank water from this thermos. I don't want to pass it on to you or the baby." I pretended not to understand and asked confusedly, "Son? How do you know it's a son?" Hearing this, Carl Miller's psychological defenses were probably on the verge of collapse. He forced himself to remain calm, coughed violently twice, and urged me to go get checked. Fortunately, the results came back normal. Carl Miller exhaled deeply, his furrowed brow relaxing as if he had completed a long and arduous journey. He held my hand tightly, his expression calm, and forced a smile that looked more painful than crying. "See? The doctor said it's nothing serious. Don't scare yourself like that." The sunlight shone on his thinning hair, sparkling brightly. His hand rested on my waist, but I skillfully avoided it in disgust. I suddenly asked with a fake smile, "Husband, if one day the baby and I leave you, will you remarry and grow old with someone else?" His expression immediately turned solemn, and he raised two short, thick fingers to the sky and swore. "Lisa, don't say such silly things. I can only have you in this lifetime, and I would never look at any other woman. Our child is the fruit of our love." I couldn't help but laugh. I mocked his hypocrisy with cold, ruthless laughter. Carl Miller was a shrewd man. Even when he cheated, he was careful not to reveal his address to Allison Carter. All for the sake of being prepared for the future, so he could cut ties cleanly. At that moment, I saw a call come in on his phone, labeled "Be colleague." "Honey, who is this Be colleague? Why aren't you answering?" Carl Miller was too busy looking at my medical report to respond. "Oh, just some work-related matters. Don't worry about it." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him block Allison Carter. What a sly fox, once the rabbit is dead, the hounds are killed. He doesn't plan to take any responsibility. Unfortunately, he underestimated one thing from the very beginning. Foxes are the hardest to get rid of. Once you get involved with one, it's not easy to shake off that stench. In the afternoon, I deliberately brought a fruit basket to Allison Carter's house to pay a visit. I had already thoroughly investigated Allison Carter's background. Her ex-husband was a sycophant she had carefully selected. After his business failed, she grew tired of him. Even during the divorce, her husband felt guilty for not being able to provide her with a good life, so he voluntarily gave up his assets and divorced her, leaving her the house as a place to live. I applied a meticulous makeup and removed the layers of clothing that had been tightly wrapped around me. "Who's there?" The moment she opened the door, she clearly paused for a moment, murmuring, "Sister, you're so beautiful. I never noticed before because you were always so heavily covered. But, you look familiar to me." I smiled gently. "Familiar? You must be more familiar with my husband." As Allison Carter looked on in confusion, I slowly opened my phone gallery and showed her the wedding photos of me and Carl Miller. She was momentarily shocked and speechless, apparently not expecting me to approach her and even become her sister. But within moments, Allison Carter regained her smug expression, tilting her head slightly and sneering disdainfully. "So what? So you've been observing me all this time, and now you're here to confront me? Let me tell you, the one who isn't loved is the third wheel. You're just an old has-been, and you'll soon be abandoned." But I merely smiled faintly and said, one word at a time. "Allison Carter, did the nourishing soup your husband gave you today warm your heart?" The smile on her face froze slightly. "What do you mean?" I remained unfazed. "The one who isn't loved is the third wheel? Then take a look at this. See how much the man you consider your cash cow for the rest of your life truly loves you." Without hesitation, I pulled out the evidence of the drugs Carl Miller had given her. Earlier, when Carl Miller had gone downstairs to secretly dispose of the medicine boxes, I had followed him and filmed it. The footage zoomed in on the names of the drugs on the boxes. It was mifepristone and misoprostol. Any pregnant woman knows these are the most effective abortion drugs. I watched her expression change from a smile to her pupils dilating, then slowly collapsing. I said calmly, "Carl Miller has been playing us both, with the sole purpose of seeing which of us can give birth to a son to continue the Ching family lineage, only to ruthlessly abandon the other afterward. Therefore, I openly confessed everything to her, and this was my primary reason for coming here." And the unfinished words I left hanging were clearly meant to tell Allison Carter that she was the one who would be abandoned. Allison Carter stared at me in horror, seemingly unable to believe it. She clutched her stomach in pain and trembled. "Are you saying he wants to kill our child with his own hands?" Before she could think further, her body had already stood up and rushed to the bathroom to vomit. But it was too late. Allison Carter panicked and hurriedly called my husband, but Carl Miller dared not answer the phone. She stared at me with wide eyes, completely broken, and called 120 to send herself to the hospital. Allison Carter's child ultimately could not be saved. She tried to contact Carl Miller, but it was already too late. When I heard the news, the smile on my lips grew wider. I didn't hesitate to tell her all the personal information about Carl Miller that he had kept from her. My husband and Margaret's clan-based mindset was deeply ingrained, and they had always firmly believed that a son was the only legitimate heir to carry on the bloodline. Daughters, on the other hand, were girls who would eventually marry into another family. Outsiders, and even unmarried daughters were not allowed to be buried in the family cemetery after death. Therefore, in their minds, a family without a son is not only looked down upon by others but also considered a great disgrace. Little did they know that the son they had buried with their own hands was the very son they had cherished so dearly. On a weekend morning, Margaret returned home from grocery shopping, holding a cardboard box and gently shaking it to gauge its weight. "Son, this is your package," Margaret said with a hint of irritation. Carl Miller was puzzled. "I didn't buy anything. Where did this package come from?" "Your memory is sometimes worse than mine," Margaret complained as she carried the box over. "Mom, what is it?" I leaned in to look and saw a note with threatening words written on it. "Carl Miller, I will destroy everything you have. I will make you suffer the same pain I did." I knew Allison Carter had taken action, but I still jumped in surprise. I asked, pretending not to know, "Honey, what's going on? Did you offend someone?" "Nothing, probably just a prank." He looked panicked, not giving us time to react, and tried to carry the box away. But I acted quickly, opening the black plastic bag inside. Inside was a deformed fetus. At a glance, it was clear it was a male fetus. "Oh my God!" Margaret screamed in horror, her face turning purple, her eyes rolling back, and she fainted on the ground. Carl Miller reacted quickly, dialed 120, and rushed Margaret to the hospital. After this ordeal, Margaret was diagnosed with coronary heart disease and couldn't withstand any more shocks. After she regained consciousness, Carl Miller took advantage of my absence from the ward to have a private conversation with Margaret in a low voice. Unfortunately, everything was overheard by me, who was hiding outside the ward. Margaret was so angry she pounded her chest. "Son, how could you be so foolish? You couldn't even figure out something like this, causing our Ching family to lose an heir for nothing. How can you face the ancestors of the Ching family?" Carl Miller, though in pain, could only sigh and say, "Mother, don't be so upset. Take care of your health. Besides, one is dead and gone. Haven't you forgotten that there's another one in Lisa's womb?" Hearing this, I almost burst out laughing. Margaret immediately stopped crying, as if she had been struck by lightning. She gripped his hand and solemnly instructed him. "Son, Lisa can't keep it a secret anymore. You must find a way to keep her calm and prevent her from doing anything reckless. You must cling to Lisa's child at all costs. This is the only heir of the Ching family. There can be no mistakes." I hid at the door of the ward, listening quietly to their conversation, calmly placing my hand on my abdomen. I walked straight up to them. "Mom, don't lie anymore. I heard everything." And I was equally shocked to learn of his affair for the first time, my face betraying my pain as I wept uncontrollably. Tears streamed down my face as I pointed at Carl Miller and asked in a trembling voice, "Husband, you've been keeping a mistress and having a child outside?" "It's not like that, Lisa. Listen to me." Carl Miller was at a loss for words, unable to defend himself. Scared, Margaret quickly signaled him to stop me, afraid I might harm the baby. In the end, Carl Miller swore to me that he would never have anything to do with her again. He stared intently at my stomach, his expression tense and filled with guilt, saying, "Lisa, I'm the one who wronged you, but look, I personally had her child aborted to protect our relationship. I've realized my mistake. Please forgive me. You have no income now, and the child needs a father." He really knows how to play on my emotions. In the end, I pretended to forgive him and accepted the 3,000 yuan apology red envelope he sent after repeatedly swearing. In reality, I sent Allison Carter his company address and other personal information. But Allison Carter's revenge was far from over. She contacted her ex-husband and went to Carl Miller's company building to cause a scene, claiming she would ruin him. In the video recorded by witnesses, a 6-foot-tall burly man with reddened eyes grabbed Carl Miller by the collar and beat him viciously. "Poor my wife. She only divorced me to get your money and help me make a comeback. She even endured the disgust of carrying your child, yet you treat her like this. You dare to harm the woman I once regarded as a goddess." Meanwhile, Allison Carter was hiding timidly behind him. I watched their dogfight with a cold gaze, finding it utterly ridiculous. I never expected that such a woman would have a loyal lapdog willing to fight for her. Her ex-husband was loyal to her, though he had no skills but was strong. After hearing all this, he chose to reconcile with Allison Carter. I never confronted Carl Miller about divorce, instead quietly using his money to raise the child, waiting for the right opportunity. The moment when Carl Miller would lose everything and be left with nothing but despair. After the company scandal, the leadership, concerned about the negative impact, fired Carl Miller on the grounds of moral misconduct. He went from being a rising star everyone admired to a figure of ridicule. I suspected that, given Allison Carter's vengeful nature, she wouldn't just settle for beating Carl Miller up. Sure enough, less than a month later, when I was 5 months pregnant, a tragic accident occurred. Allison Carter's ex-husband deliberately ran over Carl Miller. The driver was criminally detained, but he survived the accident. However, after surgery, he had his testicles removed and lost his ability to have children. After recovering, his body became weak and emaciated, and his baldness worsened. Now, he has completely transformed into a greasy, disheveled middle-aged man. Carl Miller never takes his eyes off my stomach, seeing it as the only salvation for his miserable life. Lisa, I'm counting on your stomach. I have nothing left now, only you. But I silently smile, knowing that the time has come to reel him in. After Carl Miller officially lost his job and stayed home, I deliberately started acting crazy. Not only did I cause chaos at home, but I also spread rumors that he was impotent, humiliating him in front of his friends. Afterward, I faked symptoms of pregnancy anxiety, looking up innocently and saying, "Husband, I was just momentarily confused. I made a mistake that any woman could make. Don't be angry with me." However, my behavior grew increasingly extreme. On that day at noon, she even ran out to a bridge and pretended to jump off. Carl Miller rushed out in a panic, his face flushed red. "Wife, stop this nonsense." Seeing his desperate expression, I cried even harder, looking pitiful and said, "Husband, I feel extremely insecure right now. Don't blame me. I'm emotionally shattered. What do you need to feel secure? I think the only way is for us to divorce first, with you giving up all the property, so I can take some time to recover." My erratic behavior must have scared him. I threatened Carl Miller, demanding he divorce me and give up all the property, or else I would abort his precious son. He regarded my pregnancy as his lifeline, so he naturally wanted to keep me calm and quickly agreed. But he didn't notice the sudden relief on my face. After the divorce, I took the millions Carl Miller had saved and left him, using the excuse of nurturing the baby to move to another city for rest. He feared I might do something reckless again, so he catered to my every whim, dare not utter a word of objection. He even called every day to inquire about his precious son's well-being. Months later, I gave birth to a daughter safely. Carl Miller tried to find me, but when I told him it was a daughter, he completely broke down and finally realized everything. Even his voice trembled over the phone. "Lelisha, how dare you deceive me?" I, however, laughed coldly on the other end of the line. "Carl Miller, you once believed your son was the only heir to your bloodline. Now, your son is dead by your own hands, and you will spend the rest of your life ensuring he has no descendants, slowly paying for your precious son's life." Misfortune strikes again. Margaret, who had been using an old wooden cutting board for years, was diagnosed with colon cancer. But she couldn't afford treatment, and I refused to repay Carl Miller, so she suffered at home in agony. I heard that Carl Miller couldn't contact me, so he dragged his crippled body to a construction site to carry bricks, sweating profusely under the scorching sun. But I had already cut all ties with him. From that day onward, our past was buried, never to be mentioned again. Years later, I had re-entered the workforce and achieved success, earning enough to support myself and my daughter. I encountered Allison Carter again at a shopping mall. Her ex-husband had been released from prison. She must have been desperate, so she chose to remarry her ex-husband. The Allison Carter I saw now was no longer the vibrant and confident woman I had first met. Even the pink rose on her chest had grown fat and ugly with her weight gain, losing its former beauty. Now, her appearance made her look much older than me. A man was arguing with her in an impatient tone, clearly no longer cherishing her. Allison Carter didn't even care about her dignity, arguing with him in the street, her face shiny with oil, looking like a street vendor. How could one not believe that good and evil eventually meet their just rewards? I held my daughter's small hand and curved my lips into a faint smile. Where was the unwavering passion and hope? Relying on others' love to survive, how far could one go? Women would eventually realize that loving oneself was the only correct answer.